So, my first Doctor Who video, and I'll do exactly what I initially threatened to do, which is talk about temporal mechanics and GMT. I've already tried recording this one already, actually. I tend to ramble off a lot, so I'm going to try and keep this one as short and simple as I can. Because some people find they sometimes get confused with the time travel aspect in Doctor Who, particularly in recent years, because Moffat, he likes to actually explore it as a plot device. He's also known as Moffat because of this. The first thing to know is that there are two main types of time travel in Doctor Who, in science fiction in general. There's the predeterministic version, where if you go back in time to last Tuesday and try to prevent yourself from eating a sandwich, at best you'll fail, at worst you'll fall into a destiny trap and cause yourself to eat a sandwich. And in this model, you can't change history because anything you've done in the past are actions you've already taken in the past. The other model is the non-deterministic one, where you can go back in time and you can change history. Doctor Who is unusual in that it has both of them, sometimes in the same episode, and I'm pretty sure there are cases where they both happen in the same sentence. That probably happens in Angels Takes Manhattan, but that episode has some issues, so I haven't rewatched it, so I don't remember for sure. This is mainly because Doctor Who has had a long history with lots of different writers who A, didn't take notes in the first place, and B, if they did take them, didn't share them. And then other writers come along who don't seem to completely familiarise themselves with the way it's been portrayed to work before and decide to do their own thing. Moffat! Which causes problems for people like me, because we like to analyse things and put them in neat little boxes, and then something comes along that doesn't quite fit. Anyway, Doctor Who has both of them. It's always had both of them, and that's fine. It makes it an interesting setting. Exactly which one applies at exactly what point is never properly explained, although in the new series they've mentioned these things called fixed points in time that can't be changed, but things around them can be. What bits are fixed and what bits aren't are the sort of things that, conveniently for the writers, you need a Time Lord brain shaped like a spiral staircase to understand, so they don't have to explain it. That's fine. When you can change history, however, that leads to, particularly in the Doctor Who setting, a concept called meta-time, which is the timeline of the timelines. So, in Tuesday A, you eat the sandwich. In Wednesday A, you have eaten the sandwich. In Tuesday B, you've changed it so you don't eat the sandwich, and in Wednesday B, you never ate a sandwich. Not only does Tuesday B come after Wednesday A, but Tuesday B comes after Wednesday A as well. Or did I just say that? You get this problem when talking about time travel. It gets fiddly. The last time I tried to explain this to someone, she quit the moment I used the phrase "is going to have had happened," and accused me of making up tenses, which is not actually true. The tense does exist, it's just very rarely used in English. Apparently it's used more often in German, but I don't know that for sure. And look at that, I'm rambling again. Anyway, the point about meta-time is some things can happen before other things, even if they happen after them in normal history. And that doesn't seem like it makes sense. So an example, the Third Doctor was prancing about in a cape in the 70s and or 80s before the 10th Doctor was in Pompeii. Even though Pompeii was obviously hundreds of years before the Third Doctor. But it happened afterwards from his point of view, which is important because that leads to Gallifreyan mean time, which is a phrase people have come up with for explaining this concept. And GMT is what the Time Lords follow. It's almost but not quite the same as meta-time, which is what we the audience see. So, and because we usually see it from the Doctor's point of view, that's what we see. But it comes in handy occasionally when trying to explain why certain things happen and why certain things don't happen. But the important thing to take away is there is, although as convoluted and seemingly nonsensical as Doctor Who mechanics for time travel are, they have been explained by people who have spent far too much time looking at it. And as long as Moffat doesn't do anything too bad, we can continue to explain them. A couple of things that people tend to get not wrap their heads around, particularly season 5 of Doctor Who, so spoilers for that, in case anybody hasn't seen it. The first is the paradox when, at the end of it, in the finale, when the Doctor is in the box and Rory lets him out of the box, and then the Doctor goes back in time to tell Rory how to let him out of the box. And a lot of people think, well, how did the Doctor get out of the box the first time round? And the answer is there is no first time. That's why it's a paradox. It's a constant loop. There is a specific name for this specific type of paradox, which I can't remember at the moment. I think it begins with O. It's the idea of, if I go back in time and give myself this thing, which is a keyring. If I give myself this keyring yesterday, and so yesterday, me from the future comes in and hands this to me. And so I keep that keyring for a day, and then I have to go back in time and give it to myself in the first place. And it means that this keyring never had any origin. It just springs into being because I always receive it from the future, and in the future I always give it to myself in the past. It doesn't work brilliant. It doesn't actually mesh brilliantly well with the meta-time concept, but that's because it's a paradox, and the whole point of a paradox is it doesn't make sense. You shouldn't use this to get out of sticky situations in the Doctor Who universe, because paradoxes cause damage to time and all sorts of nasty things happen, and you get attacked by dragons from beyond space and time. There's an excuse in the Series 5 finale in that he doesn't really care about damaging the universe at that point, because the universe is about that big and shrinking. He has higher concerns. The other big thing in Season 5 that a lot of people find confusing is the concept of what the cracks do. For starters, the cracks can do several things. They're cracks in the fabric of reality, and they can be used to get from one place in reality to another if two of the cracks happen to link up. You can also sort of peek in from outside the universe through them. But if you get eaten by a crack, which is, well, it's referred to as being eaten, but if you fall into it and don't come out the other side, which is the main thing that happens with it, you have been removed from reality. You've been completely removed from history. What the cracks don't do is rewrite history so you never existed. They excise you from history so you never existed. And there is a very important difference. If you take the analogy that history is a book, rewriting history so you never existed means going back to the point where you first entered as a character and rewriting the entire story from that point. So that you never exist, and things shift around to compensate for that. What the crack does is it takes that book where you are a character and Tipexes out your name. It leaves behind all the consequences of your actions, and so to an external observer it looks as though you should be there. There's a big U-shaped hole in the universe. You never existed, but everything you did still happened, and that seems like it shouldn't make much sense. It doesn't. That's because the universe was going kablooey at the time. It's not supposed to make sense. It's also actually very consistent with the way things like this have been portrayed in Doctor Who before. So Moffat wasn't just pulling it out of his arse. Or if he was very fortuitously pulling it out of his arse. Because it's the exact same way the DMAC gun works, which is a Time Lord superweapon, and the Oubliette of Eternity works, which is a Time Lord execution method for very nasty prisoners. Spoilers for Neverland, which was one of the audios, which I really recommend actually, it's very good. When you toss somebody into the Oubliette of Eternity, it removes them from history. There is a case where a couple of people got tossed into it because they broke into sealed records in order to find out what happened to their parents. And it turns out their parents had been tossed into it. And if it rewrote history, that couldn't ever happen because If the parents never existed, where do the kids come from? Removing things from history in this way tends to act a bit like a perception filter on people. So people, the duck pond is the first example brought up, and it was meant to explain how this works, but a lot of people didn't quite get it, and also they tended to think it had some more significance about what happened to the ducks. It didn't. It's just an example of how the cracks work. The ducks got eaten by the crack, so they never existed. But because in the previous version of Metatime they had existed, a duck pond was built, and people knew it was a duck pond, and their brains sort of hit blue screen of death if they tried to think on why they were calling it a duck pond when there weren't any ducks. It causes a mental blank spot, and the mind just skips over it and carries on as though nothing happened, because it's sort of subconsciously aware that something's gone wrong and all that stuff. So yeah, that's how the cracks work. And it's surprisingly consistent, actually, even though they seem like it's just a plot device. Well, it is a plot device, but it's a plot device that makes sense in the plot. What other things do people tend to go... Oh, there are probably other things, time travel related things, that people start scratching their heads and go, a lot of them actually do end up making sense, and part of the issue is some people can intuitively understand time travel, at least in the fictionalized time travel, and the way it works. Other people just don't get it. And for a long time, I was of the opinion that people who didn't get it were complete and utter idiots, because it's so obviously simple. Why can't they understand this? I have grudgingly had to accept the fact that actually these people aren't idiots, it's just they think in a slightly different way, so it just doesn't make sense to them. It's in the same way I am absolutely hopeless at languages. I just can't get my head around learning another language. To the point that when I was a kid, I was effectively being raised with English and Polish, and I didn't speak. I refused to, I would not speak as a child until I was only getting input in one language. But I am, in my opinion anyway, not a complete idiot. I've also met various people who are actually smart and know things and yet can't get this. It's just people think in different ways, and for some people it's intuitive, for some people it isn't. Moffat doesn't seem to realise that for some people this stuff that he finds intuitive is actually quite complicated, which is why you can have problems and sometimes people don't understand what happened in episodes. I'm going to end this video here because otherwise I'll go on forever basically, and it will become even more rambling and incoherent. If you drop a message if there's a particular time travel aspect you want an answer on, and I might be able to answer it. A lot of them I can, sometimes some of them I can't, but I think most of the ones I can think of I can usually come up with an answer. There's also a whole load of other stuff on the difference between time streams and timelines. I don't fully get that, but I think essentially a timeline is history, a time stream is a person's personal history, and time streams can take into account changing timelines. There's all sorts of weirdness. There's also stuff about temporal shielding and Time Lords, which I'll leave for another video. See you then.